Welcome to the Bookish Hour with your hosts, Sarah E. Burr and J.C. Kenney. We'll be starting soon. And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bookish Hour. I am your host for the evening, Sarah Burr. My partner in crime, JC Kenney, is on vacation, so we are in for a very fun, intimate chat with our guest this week. We are joined by Trish Esden. Trish is celebrating the release of her phenomenal mystery, A Wealth of Deception. Trish, it is so exciting to have you here. I can't wait to talk all things antiques, artwork, and mystery. It's going to be fun. I know that our viewers are super excited to have you here. Could you introduce yourself to the folks who may not be familiar with your work?
Sure. I'm Trish Esden. I'm the author of the Scandal Mountain Antiques Mystery Series from Crooked Lane Books. I previously had written two series under the name of Pat Esden, which are slightly dark, slightly sexy, contemporary fantasy. That's one reason I have two names. That was Pat Esden, and now I'm Trish Esden. A lot of people ask that. Not only do I write about an antique dealer, but I am a full-time antique dealer and I have been involved in the business since I was a teenager. I live in Northern Vermont, which is actually where my series takes place, in the non-existent town of Scandal Mountain. However, the other other locations in my novels are all true, which is something that I did on purpose. It's a lot easier to create a fake town so you can put whatever you need in it. But then a lot of readers like to be able to actually go on the internet or recognize places that they've been. So, and that's about it for me. There's two books in my series so far, The Art of the Decoy and A Wealth of Deception, that just came out on Tuesday.
And congratulations once again on your release. What you were saying, Trish, about the fact that Scandal Mountain is a fictional town. As I was reading this, I spent a lot of my childhood in Midcoast, Maine. And so sort of familiar with areas of Vermont. And I found myself, it's like, is this place real? Like, because you're mentioning places like Manchester, Burlington, Shelburne, is that? Yeah. And so I was just like, wait, does this place exist? Because number one, Scandal Mountain has got to be the most exciting and cool name of a town that I've ever heard in a mystery before. I would love to know how the village of Scandal Mountain kind of came to life for you as a writer.
Actually, in my mind, I do have sort of a location for it. I'd have to kick another town out of being, which is a tiny town with maybe two houses in it. And I Scandal Mountain expands, which is one thing you can do when you have a fictitious town as the series goes on. If you need like a barbershop or a bakery, you can add it. So I'm a very visual writer, and it's in my head. I can visualize the whole setting and the whole scene. I do draw maps, but definitely, and I did actually base it a little bit on Vermont history, like the fact that it originally was a logging town and that the railroads came in. All that is standard history of a lot of towns in New England. If you're from Maine, it's similar up there. There are very similar things.
Yeah, with just the opening pages are so immersive, and it was so much fun to visit. And what you said about creating maps, our viewers have heard this many, many times. Both JC and I are just like big book map people. Absolutely love it. And I could definitely tell like that you had this cohesiveness and connectivity with the town as I was reading, and that really shines through. And before we kind of get into how the series came about and how the idea for your main character, Edie Brown, kind of grew from your experiences, I would assume. I just want to say hello to our viewers out there, Farmhouse Reader, Kaladia, Mark. I will make sure to pass on your comment regarding JC on vacation. And Wild Rosebird, thank you very much for joining us this evening. So folks, make sure if you have any questions for Trish as we go through the show, put them in our YouTube chat. And also, we have a fabulous giveaway this evening. Trish, would you like to tell a little bit about what is a part of your wonderful and generous bundle?
Well, first of all, we're going to have a hardcover signed copy of The Art of the Decoy.
Beautiful.
But I have some actually very special swag that I do. I have downloads for coloring book pages, some of the swag and bookmarks. But I also have, because this is a big hint to kind of the background of the book, I have a hand-painted Russian Matryoshka doll, which will be part of it. You know, they're the nesting dolls. If I can, well, there's more of them inside.
I remember being fascinated by those as a kid, and just the littlest doll. For some reason, I was just like, I could not wait to find her in all of like everything coming apart. And so when I came across that in the series, there are so many like amazing pieces of art, of furniture, of dishware that you mentioned. And, you know, I feel like we could kind of veer off into a little bit of an Antiques Roadshow moment for the hour, but we'll definitely talk about some of your favorite antiques as we continue. But I would love to learn more about Edie. She's got a very compelling backstory. She's a very complicated young woman. She has a lot going on. So I would love if you would introduce her to our viewers.
Well, first of all, Edie Brown's name actually comes from an interesting place. My husband has very little to do with my books. He doesn't read them. Sometimes brainstorm with me a little bit, but he came up with the name Edie Brown, who is his grandmother's name. I said I wanted a name that was an old New England, Vermont name, and he said Edie Brown. And I actually even had a critique partner say, gosh, that's a boring name. And I said, that's not a boring name. That's exactly what I want. I wanted an old-fashioned name that a family, New England family might give. That's a family name. And there also is a little mystery to her name, because when you're, as you know, when you're writing a series, you have to put little clues in there. And if you're paying attention in the first book, Edie Brown's last name is not the same as her mother or her uncle. So it's very clear that there's more to her background than you actually learn in the first book. You learn a little bit in the second book. And her, the house they live in, they have a big house. That's a big brick house, which is on the cover of the book. And their antique shop is in a carriage barn next to the house where her mother's art studio is. And it's a multi-generational. At this point, her uncle lives there. Her mom is not home because her mom is in prison for art forgery, which is why Edie comes home. She came home to try to rebuild the family business, which her mother has really driven into the ground. But it was her grandparents who developed the business, and it was her grandparents who raised Edie. And you don't really find out in the first book exactly what's going on, because it isn't part of the mystery in the first book. But as the series goes on, you will learn more and more about this. And there's a lot of antagonism between Edie and her mother, and there's good reason for it on both sides of it. Her mother is kind of not very reliable person. She's a flake, but she is an incredibly talented copyist artist. And her mother insists that she did not forge the painting. She did make the painting. It was a copy, but she did not do the signature that's on it. And that her arrest was a setup. But Edie doesn't believe it. She thinks her mother's lying. And Edie's background actually starts, part of it is that, meanwhile, when she was in her late teens, her grandparents who had raised her died in a plane crash that she witnessed, a single-engine plane crash. And emotionally, she has not allowed herself to really get past that. And she's directed her anger at her mother. And I think that's that's quite a bit of her background. I don't want to give away too much, but she is a character that has a lot going on there. And she's a very driven, very smart, very educated woman who wants to prove herself, and
I
probably up to her mother is a lot of it.
I think that, I mean, that comes across so strongly. She's such a likable character for all of these, the vulnerability that she's really able to show, and the relationships around her are just really thoughtful and genuine. The since you've mentioned her mother, she plays, at least in book two, she plays a big presence even though she's not around. And I found her story and really kind of her background equally fascinating, just as somebody like who's interested in artwork but knows very little about it, who loves going to museums and seeing all of this amazing history on display. I would love to know, and actually, before I ask my question, I am just going to sidebar for one of the questions that we have from Farmhouse Reader. They are saying that they love antiquing. And do you have your own shop?
I actually don't have a shop. I had a shop for 20 years that was an 1830s country store, very much original to Victorian era.
Mm-hmm.
I did my other half of, I was always raised to believe you could do a lot of things that you love. And I was a florist. I did up to 30 weddings a summer. We had a florist shop and antique business and kind of giftware and various things that I ran with my husband. At that point, I had a shop, and I'm just thrilled to say I no longer have a shop. So on weekends, I can go to flea markets and yard sales. I sell online. I have rent space in another store, and I actually sell there. And I have a lot of contacts that I buy particular things for and sell them to.
That sounds, I do want to like point out the fact where you said that you were raised to do things that you love. I think that's a wonderful way to be raised. I feel like I was raised the same way. And I think that, the fact that the two of us are sitting here talking about, books and books that we've written, I think really speaks volumes to that. So along the lines of going back to Edie's mother and the fact that she is a copyist. Now, I didn't know that was a thing that you could be, let alone that you go to the Met and the National Gallery to get certified for it. One of the comments that you had made in the book is that it is forgery's legal kissing cousin. And I'm wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about what a copyist does and why that's allowed. Because that was one thing I was like, oh, interesting.
Well, if you think about it, people who have these multi-million or billion-dollar paintings, they don't play it on the walls in their homes. And a lot of them will pay to have someone create paintings that are look-alike. And then the real one stays in a vault that, that's climate controlled and everything. And there are people out there that is their profession, and usually they have limited number of artists that they actually are capable of copying. So I'm a little fictitious in that Edie's mother copies a lot of people. But she has in the book, there's an upper end antique dealer by the name of Graham, who kind of has a love-hate relationship. Edie can't stand him because he's a snob and a womanizer and all these sort of things. But he does get jobs for her mother and gets a kickback, and always got a kickback because he has very upper end clients that Edie's family has kind of gone by the wayside. But her mother has a lot of skills. And in my own mind, I go, why can't she make a living with her own skills? But it's, art is not it's like writing. It's not an easy place to make money, no matter how skilled you are, or a living. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. And I'm curious because you had mentioned the signature, and there, without like giving away too much of like what happens in the book, I'm curious, like what's the signature deal, I guess.
Well, usually, and I don't think I'm giving anything away because I'm not 100% sure is mentioned in the book or not, or one of the books. but usually on the back of the painting, it'll be stamped that it is not an original.
Gotcha. Okay.
Uh, and the fact that Edie's mother was spending a great deal, Edie saw her mother doing Maxwell Parrish's signature,
Mm-hmm.
getting used to it. And her mother claimed that this was to get in the mindset
Gotcha.
of the before she painted it. And Edie found it a little strange why she was being so careful with that specific part of the whole painting. And so I'm not really going to say a lot more about that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that answered my question.
There may be other in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in your books just like highlight such a fascinating world of crime that I personally had not really explored as a mystery reader. I'm usually like, give me murder, give me dead bodies. But the way that you wrote this mystery has like, it was just so captivating. But it was a genuine mystery. We weren't really dealing with a murder. And so I would love to know like a little bit more about the process when you were coming up with the idea for the Scandal Mountain Antique Mysteries. You know, were you like always going to just focus on these art crimes, or were you thinking like, oh, like maybe there's a dead body found at an art gallery or something along those lines? Like, I'm curious how you decided to go in this avenue for your mystery selection.
Well, I'll actually be honest with you. I watch a lot of mystery on TV and I read mystery books. And until my books came out, wasn't really aware that there were so many people that believe that all mysteries are murder mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
To me, mysteries is a separate category, but at some point it's particularly in the cozy traditional straddling area, it's become the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted the antique to be the center. In fact, when I'm dreaming up a novel, that is probably one of the first things I go, you know, what antique or category of antiques am I going to center this in, and how will it challenge my main character? That's the way I plot. Many decades ago, going back to the 1980s, there was a TV show. It's also books called the Lovejoy Mystery Series. Lovejoy, the books would be something that would make people cringe nowadays, really bad, really bad. I like pretty tolerant. The TV show would probably make people cringe. The guy who's the main character is a roguish antique dealer in England. And all his mysteries centered on the antiques mostly. There were a few dead bodies, and there obviously are dead bodies in my books, but their background, their backstory, or they're fresh dead bodies, but they are not the center. But I think probably from what I really liked his series, and I thought, oh, wouldn't this be better if the roguish person was the woman, the female? And also, as an antique dealer, I do a lot of reading newspapers, trade newspapers. So I've read about these big crimes. There's a nonfiction book by the name of Priceless about the FBI art crime team. And when I read that book, it was just a fabulous book. I realized that a lot of the crimes in there were crimes that I'd read about in the newspaper when they happened. And in the center of all those crimes is the antique or the type of art, or even the type of crime. It might be about burglaries. They might be stealing a variety of things, but it was about antique people going in and stealing antiques to orders, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I really didn't think that the bodies were necessarily the body drop. And I have had people say, well, I waited for the dead body drop. And I'm like, it's not going to drop, guys. Well, it might be, but
I will say I wasn't waiting for it. I was wondering, and I was like, but how am I was just so captivated by this art mystery. And I can't imagine the amount of fun that you must have had coming up with this amazing story for the piece of art that is central to the plot. And I'm wondering if maybe you can tease a little bit about that with our audience members, because you really just get to create this like amazing mysterious artist figure. And I was just completely captivated. I absolutely loved the name Vespa. And it was just like so much fun and so creative. And so I'm wondering what your process was like, what influences you were taking to build that particular persona.
Well, I can tell you with Vespa because I actually I'm a pretty visual writer. Like
Mm-hmm.
things, I visualize everything, and I visualized her in my head what she looks like, and so kind of the visual of her came and before the name, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and I'm not going to say anymore, but you know, works. Um, and the other part of that is Vespa, who's the artist in this book, who supposedly created or did create this collage. Um, she came along because of she's called the Grandma Moses of the 21st century. And I've sort of had a love-hate relationship over my life with Grandma Moses. I don't know how many of you are familiar with her art, but Grandma Moses was in the first part of the 19th century, and she did these very quaint, picturesque, idyllic views of Vermont. They'd be sleds, sugaring scenes. And as I got older and I started to look at her things, I saw them a little bit differently. Um, and then when I read about her and realized that she was considered, they call her a folk artist, but she really was an outsider artist to start with. She started writing when she was quite elderly. I can't remember if it's in her 70s or 80s, but she had gotten where she did a lot of needlework and she couldn't do that anymore. And she actually didn't have art tools to start with. She did a lot of it with fingers or pieces of wood. She threw glitter on her paintings. I'm like, oh, who does that? Like on the outside of the first grade. Well, back then they didn't have lighting in all the houses. So actually the glitter would make these things show up in either the limited electric light or the kerosene light. Um, and this is where we get in the book. It's outsider art, but they call her a folk artist now. But the truth is, an outsider artist are people who live outside the mainstream of society and certainly outside of the art world. And Grandma Moses actually, until she was discovered and got an agent and took her artwork to New York City, she really wasn't part of mainstream society. This was her vision of what the world was like. And in my book, Vespa is also an elderly person, but she became an artist late in life in this century, in this time period. And what she sees is the horrors of our world now. The drug abuse, people attacking other people, people, just screaming and the dark things. Whereas Grandma Moses saw the world in naive and beautiful. So in a way, to me, it's sort of like dark and light, two women both coming to art at late in life, or two people. And Vespa's collages are made with all kinds of junk, like trash and pieces of cardboard and newspaper and pieces of junk jewelry and all kinds of things. So they kind of glitter a little, although I don't believe that she uses any glitter itself. But that's, to me, I don't tend to get political, but it was my emotional speaking about what an artist like Grandma Moses, if she were here today, might see. And it probably wouldn't make her very happy to see what's happened to the world. And she probably, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying the descriptions of the collages were just like so visceral and vivid. And I mean, you can feel that. It's like, this is a critique of the world as a lot of us are experiencing it. So I think that just from your description alone, that was just so vivid. And just like who is this person that is just kind of capturing the dark side of humanity as we see it today.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about Edie. We've talked a little bit about the artist that's kind of the center of her inquiries in A Wealth of Deception. I would love to talk a little bit about the wonderful people around her, because she's got a really strong support system in her Uncle Tuck. as well as her shop assistant Kala. Like they are just like really, really strong characters and there to support Edie in such a, I think, convincing way. And I think how, for me, how it came across is, you always kind of have to hedge, especially when you're writing about an amateur sleuth, the should I put myself in danger? And if I am going to put myself in danger, how good are my friends going to be at like holding me back from this, or are they going to come along with me? And I think with the circumstances that Edie is involved with, especially financially, where it's like got to find a way to keep our shop open, that I loved how Tuck and Kala were just like in for the ride and like we'll help you keep safe, but like we kind of we need this money, so like let's figure this out. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how those characters kind of came to be.
Well, everybody, when I start to develop characters, and I'm a person who finds everything in revision. In the first draft, I start to find the characters, but they all have very large backstories. Obviously, particularly Kala has a backstory that you haven't seen yet. And Tuck does too. Tuck, Edie's mother is Tuck's sister, and he's pretty heartbroken over what's happened to the grandparents who were his parents. So I think one thing I try to show, which is very hard, is how this is affecting Tuck. And he's a loving and a caring person, but at the same time, there's stuff in there that mentally has to really be hurting him because he's gone through the exact same thing pretty much as Edie has. And I really did want her to have a sense of family. This story is a large part about family and found family, and bringing family together. And Kala Kala just loves it. She's kind of sneaky. This is like dreamland to her. Kala's our techie person, and she just loves it. But she is more of a vintage antique person, which is natural. I can see her at Comic-Con having a great time. And this is offering her not only a job, but the security of a place to live and friends. And Vermont is not necessarily the place you'd expect to find her. She's really a person that on the outside you'd go, she belongs in the city. But that's not true at all. And Tuck, in a way, he has a lot of mothering instincts. I don't design my characters after people I know, but Tuck does have some of the characteristics of my father. My parents were I had a variety of businesses, but one of them was a greenhouse business. And our basement in the house I lived as a teenager had fluorescent lights, and he had African violets and things in the African violet family in the basement. So the basement, the whole African violet part of this, and even the garden plants, a lot of that is actually directly from my life. My father couldn't cook to save his soul. My mother go away at lunchtime and he'd say, "How do I open the can of soup?" And I'm not kidding. And Tuck's a fabulous cook, but so I do use bits and pieces of people I know. And sometimes they get in trouble too. Edie's not the only one who gets in trouble. They tend to walk the line between good and bad. And I would say the person who keeps everyone on the straight and narrow a little more is Edie's love interest, Shane, because her love interest, by the time we get to book 2, is in the state police. And he is very much law enforcement oriented. And at the same time, his morals are, I'm going to do what's right and I'm going to do what's on the side of law. But Edie met him when he was her probation officer, because she was on probation for selling stolen property, and they became lovers while he was her probation officer. So he obviously is willing to cross the line. But it makes for an interesting relationship. So I would say he's a lot of my balancing influence, and also the connection to law enforcement at times where they need information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed Shane's character, and the dichotomy of, what you were just talking about with, like, yes, he's on the straight and narrow, but he also has this, like, kind of bent the rules and fell, like, got into a relationship, or not a relationship, but they got together as as he probably shouldn't have done. So he has this interesting dichotomy to his personality, and his insights are really were really enjoyable to read and authentic to read. I think a lot of the time in traditional mysteries or cozy mysteries, you have a love interest who's kind of there to, like, say, no, like, don't do this, stay safe, like, I want to protect you, and all of this. But I feel like Shane does a really good job of knowing that Edie's in a hard spot, and, like, she's got to fix her family. They've got to fix the septic tank, which, oh my God, that part, I was like, oh God, that was horrible. But, like,
That was from experience. That was from real experience.
from the way that you wrote about it, I was like, this had to have happened to you.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh gosh. And just, like, all of, like, the things that kind of happen subsequently, where she's got to get this fixed, or, the Graham is going to rat her out to the county and close her down, all this stuff. And so, like, Shane really understands the predicament that she's in and knows, like, she's got to do what she's got to do, but he's there as a support system, but also is like, hey, if you need help, let me know. So that I commend you on the romantic subtext that follows the two of them through the series. And I'm pivoting over to some of our reader or viewer questions right now. We have Laurel, who is saying that she liked hearing about the Grandma Moses background and influence, and as well as the development of Tuck and Kala. And we have Wild Rosebird asking, being a writer is such an introspective art. How is it for you having to be an extrovert in promoting your work? That's a really good question. How do we summon the energy to do what we do post launch?
I would say the hardest part, because I'm sort of like, I've been forced to be an extrovert, owning a business and doing that for most of my life. I am an introvert. I'd say I'm in there in that 50-50 thing. I can turn it on for short bursts. I find conventions are hard, real hard, and that you have to say to yourself, I'm going back to my room for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just getting out of here. I don't have to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, you can't be in this profession nowadays. You have to do all the marketing. Nobody else is going to do it. Your publishers, I'm traditionally published, and my publisher does a few things, but they're not going to make your book a success. You have to do it yourself. So you kind of just have to say, you can't be who you want to be. You have to kind of, and I think the other thing is, and it's like, I think it's very similar to finding your writing voice. I think when you can get to the point where you can be more of yourself or your writer's self, then it becomes easier. Like talking to you like this, if I'm being my authentic self or my authentic writer self, it becomes much easier.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm trying to put on a show and be something I'm not, and like for me with my writing voice, when I got to the point where I could actually listen to the voices in my head to write dialogue or whatever and just let it be, and then clean up the writing rather than trying to copy what other writers were doing, then I was more successful. That's sort of a weird answer to that question, but that's
I think I think you hit the nail on the head, especially the authenticity part, because when I first got started writing and starting having my work published, I am very much an introvert by nature. I think in my early 20s, I had like a brief moment where it's like, oh, I can be an extrovert, but it totally depleted every energy cell that I had in my body. So, figuring out, like, how do I present myself when I, wish I could be kind of like cowering in the corner? and not talking to anybody and reading a book. How do I present myself? And I think that, finding who you are as a writer may not be exactly who you are as a person, but the story that you want to tell and the conviction that you want to tell it with, I think is a really great way to bolster your inner, either self-confidence or what have you. And eventually, as you keep doing this and having those experiences, you'll realize, like, okay, like this is totally doable, and this is a hurdle that I can overcome, and this is who I can be. And I think that that's a really exciting part of the role that we have outside of actually like sitting at our computer, sitting down at a notebook and writing a story.
I think the other thing that makes it easier, I have a physical calendar because I do better with physical things. And I
Mhm.
actually everything I have to do on there. And it makes it easier to be an extrovert when I'm very confident about this is what I have to do today, you know. And not like with social media, you're very active on social media and I'm fairly active, but you don't have to do it all. Pick what you're comfortable with and what you like. I'm not on TikTok because it would be one step too many.
I agree.
You know,
I think
it,
that's one of the biggest things, when I talk with new authors, especially, or folks who are, they're querying for the first time, they're trying to build their audience, and they know that they have to be on social media. That's unfortunately like just something that we have to do these days. But one thing that I always reinforce is like, pick one or two places that you feel comfortable being yourself and sharing yourself the most with, and drive your engagement on those platforms. It's If you're trying to be everywhere at once, it's not going to work. It's going to be too hard. You're not going to be able to engage with the people who are reaching out to you. And I think that's like definitely something that every new author on the scene should really take to heart, because it's too much to ask that of us and still expect us to write these books and these amazing plot lines that you're coming up
yeah,
with, Trish. It's just like you definitely pick a couple lanes, and that's where you can really flourish in.
yeah. And like I love Canva because it's like a break for me.
Hmm.
Uh, and so when I need to step away, I'm doing something productive, but something creative that I enjoy,
Hmm.
which is part of the business.
Yes, Canva is one of my favorite ways to decompress, especially if I'm like stuck on a particular scene or just like a particular plot item. Pull it up, like, okay, let's just brainstorm something. And sometimes it's like I'm not even working on the same series that I'm having the issue with. I'm just taking a break and getting lost in colors and beautiful images and all of this fun stuff. I think that it's such a great way to just kind of release and decompress. And so, plug for
Yeah.
Canva.
Also, I think with the introvert thing, this is new for me, but I found doing like Facebook parties or at conventions when you're presenting, that finding doing it with a group of authors
Mhm.
really helps. And they don't have to be your critique partners or whatever. I've been doing a thing called Midnight at the Antique Shop with three other authors who also have antique dealers as the main character. And we've done Facebook parties together. We've done other things together. I did a event for Sisters in Crime with a library in Connecticut, which was a different topic and different people. But having a group of people really helps because you're all pushing each other. You're
Mhm.
helping come forward, and everyone feels the same.
Yes, for sure.
On
The writing community and the mystery community is just, everyone is, JC says this all the time, where it's like a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah,
And it's such a great way to stay connected, but also to have that support system, because writing can be a very isolating experience. So
yeah,
I think that, yes, finding a group that you can really connect with, and sharing those experiences is a great way for anybody to kind of overcome any nerves or jitters. um, I want to talk more about antiques. But before we do that, we are already 40 minutes into our hour.
Uh-oh.
I missed my without JC here as my timekeeper. It's like I missed my half hour mark. We have to open up our giveaway.
Oh, okay.
For folks who would be interested in winning a very fabulous giveaway bundle that includes a hardcover copy of Art of the Decoy, which is book 1 in the Scandal Mountain Antiques Mysteries. So you can enjoy Trish's series right from the beginning. And some coloring pages, the Russian nesting dolls. Trish, what would you like your magic word to be for folks to type into the chat?
Well, I was going to say first, this is shipped in the U.S. or Canada.
Yes.
I can't any further.
I'm not 100% sure we actually have gotten, we do have an Australian author coming on the show, which is very exciting. I don't know if we've actually gotten to other countries beyond the U.S. and Canada. If I am wrong, folks, for those of you who are entering, you do need to have a U.S. or Canadian mailing address for Trish to get your prize to you.
We could always do an alternate prize of like an ebook or something like that, but they just don't compare. Let's use deception, since this is deception.
That's a good one. Right? Deception. Yes.
The birth deception.
Perfect. So folks, make sure that you are first logged into either Google or YouTube so that you can access the chat feature. Type in the word deception into the chat so that you can enter into this fabulous giveaway. And we will draw our winner towards the end of the hour. Trish, I would love to know, what are some of the most exciting antique finds that you have come across in your career?
Well, my most exciting is always the one I just found. I mean, it always is. It doesn't matter. Always the latest, but probably the most unusual thing I found was we bought a wicker casket. Now, wicker caskets, we actually got it out of a barn that was part of a funeral home. Wicker caskets weren't used to bury people, and they were used to bring, in the Victorian times, the bodies home from the house to the funeral home for transporting the bodies. And we actually sold this particular wicker casket to Shelburne Museum, which is a well-known big museum, after they figured out that it would fit in their fancy glass horse-drawn hearse, because the wicker casket had to fit in there perfect. So I can go to Shelburne Museum or actually online, and I could see our casket there. I didn't try it out. Tried it. My husband tried out, various other people. It's like, oh, we have to lay in this casket. So that was probably one of the more interesting in that aspect. We've found antiques in some very strange places, I would say. We've been in a lot of, the first book talks about a derelict home, has a derelict farm in it. We've been in a lot of half falling down houses. I've been in one house which had a tree growing up through the middle of it, not intentionally. This house was falling down and the tree was growing up, and she had like sheets of plastic up, and we had to go around. And you feel bad, for these people. And sometimes everything they have has been ruined because the house is ruined. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. We went in a barn last year, and any of you who watch like the Antique Roadshows knows that car stuff and oil cans and advertising things are big. And my husband went into one barn, and here was all these great oil cans in there, big gas cans and oil cans that had been there for nearly a century, that were just absolutely fabulous. So we hauled all those out. I'm trying to think. Oh, and not in the antique things, but it is in the book, the first book. I love trolls. And trolls are not that old, particularly, though the Dom trolls from the late 50s and early 60s are quite valuable. And last summer, I was at this yard sale, which just had pretty much nothing, like Tupperware and stuff like that. And there was this duffel bag, and thank goodness I unzipped this duffel bag. It was heavy, and it was packed. There were 100 trolls in it. And I said, what do you want for this bag of trolls? Oh, I'll take $10 for like 100 of them. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't get them out of there fast enough. So that was pretty exciting. Go ahead.
I'm curious, and hopefully this doesn't get too far off topic of writing. But it's more and it was a scene where Edie, she is visiting the home of a woman who she's passed away. These like looking through all of the things that this woman has, and her daughter is there kind of guiding her through and saying, oh, you can take that or have that. Do you ever, is there ever a situation where you see something that's like so incredibly valuable and the person's like, oh, 25 cents? Is there like some type of like code that you're like, I've got to offer this person a little bit more? Or like, what's the, what do you owe people if they
That
don't know what they have?
that actually is a very important part of the book series to me, because it sounds like Edie is pretty up for grabs and doing what she wants, but she has a very strong moral compass
Mhm.
to the that happened to her, or like if it happened to me. Um, you really are obliged if you come across them. Like she came across the first book as a decoy collection. She could have said to them, "Oh, these are $20 each," and they might have sold them. I don't think the old man would have done that, but someone might have. And I've known in real life where these sort of things have come up. And if you technically, legally, if you are an expert and you buy something really cheap and then turn around and sell it for a lot of money and they find out, they technically can come after you because you are an expert in that area.
Mhm.
Questionable is if you're not an expert, even though you're a dealer, this is not your expertise. It just, like if I bought a really fine painting, I'm not an art expert. Um, so if I went in and bought a painting for $100 that was really a $50,000 painting, I probably wouldn't be liable because I just don't know that much. So am
Wow.
I morally liable after I sell it for that much money to go back to the family and say, here's some extra money?
Mhm.
That's one of the things that makes the whole series fun. This is a moral dilemma.
Yeah. I
There's,
could definitely see it's like, especially as she's, going through this house, I'm like, oh, like what happens if somebody's just like, oh, take it for $10 and it's worth like $100,000?
well, the other interesting thing about that particular scene, because it's fairly early in the book, most of what she finds is nothing of incredible value. And she finds things like the Matryoshka doll and porcelain statues of ballerinas. But as an antique dealer, you have to have a fairly wide knowledge. Her uncle Tuck knows books, so he's looking in the bookcase to value the books to see if there's anything. Edie goes into the bedroom and she actually finds silk scarves and some jewelry and some other silver pieces in there that she is not an expert in. So she's taken a chance, but she has enough experience, and it is a certain amount of eye and knowing what's the market and what is sellable at the time. And that's what's going on in that scene. Is there is her also taking a chance. She could go in there and buy these beautiful Russian scarves and get them home and find out that they're garbage and that she's actually spent too much. That happens just as often. Um, you know, I know that from experience. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
lot of chance you're going. I bought calendar tops the other week. Calendar tops from the 1920s. They're about this big, and they would have had a calendar attached, but all it's left is this cardboard. All I could say is it looks like Valentine's cards, like the kind of, they're gaudy scenes, but they're really
Mhm.
cool. I really didn't know what they were worth at the time I bought them from the person, and I bought almost a dozen of them. So he's saying this is what I want for him, and I have to go, okay, am I willing to risk this amount of money? What do I visually think these are worth for my own experience? So you do take a lot of chances. And that's
Gosh,
what
yeah.
he's doing in that scene. She knows she has some education in art. So there is a Russian icon in there that she's making a guess, because you have to think on your feet, but she is making a guess on that. Um, and some of the other little pieces she buys.
That is
So
so I just it's so cool, so fascinating, and just like the intricacies of just this particular profession and just everything that and it really just comes to life. And so for our viewers, if you even have a mild interest in antiques, like I cannot recommend this book enough. Like so good, so vivid, so wonderful. And our time is coming to a close, if you can already believe it. That was one thing, Trish, I should have told you before we started. Like this hour just goes by so quickly. And this has been such a fascinating conversation. And I think we're going to have a little bit more of a fascinating discussion as we talk about the our final segment of what are you reading, what are you watching, what are you consuming. Tell us what has been keeping you entertained of late.
Well, I actually have a book called Leave the Lights On by Liv Anderson. I have an arc of it, and I'm supposed to be reading that soon. But I didn't want to read it while I was doing my release event because it's pretty brain consuming. So I know we're cheating a little. We talked about. So I have books that when don't have a lot of mental withspan, I just want to read for fun. I actually was reading a couple of Stephanie Plum books because they're just like junk food. At least to me, I can read them quickly. And I also was reading it's old Mary Reinhardt, Roberts Reinhardt Gothic novel, which is just really quick and easy read. I'm a slow reader, so some of these are fun, and they have I don't know, they just take you back. And then I had one of your favorites, and I will tell you, I did not read these as a child. They were child, but oh, now you're going to die. I buy them as an antique dealer because they sell really well. And I bought, I think it was box of 52 of various age of Nancy Drew books. Now, this particular one had a bad page, has pages coming out of it. Ooh. So I actually get to keep it to read. And I read them now because they're almost like a short story.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And they're fun. And I also just watched the Nancy Drew 1938 and 39 black and white movies. And boy, Nancy Drew in the old books and the old movies, she was really quite something. She was really kind of a bad example.
As folks who are following me on social media may or may not be aware, I am currently preparing to lead the Nancy Drew panel at Malice. So right now I'm reading The Secret of the Golden Pavilion. This is the yellow spine version. This is something that, gosh, it's in really good condition, but I got it when I was probably like 10 years old. So I'm pretty proud of how well I treat my books. But yeah, like in reading The Secret of the Old Clock, and I'm reading I'm not reading the original version because that one is like very, like Nancy may need to take a little chill pill at some points. But when they kind of revised the earlier books back, I believe it was in the 50s, to make, kind of bring Nancy up to date, make things a little more inclusive and what have you. She still just like barges into people's homes. And I was like, gosh, like I remember wanting, and I still want to be Nancy Drew. Let's be real. But it's like, wow, I could never just like randomly go up to someone's house and be like, I'm coming in to have lunch with you and asking you questions. Like it is such a delight to kind of revisit those books. Especially now from like, with a 2023 lens that we have. She is a firecracker and I love her. But wow, she gets into some crazy adventures.
I really think about it till I watch the movies, but my mother would have been about her age at the same time period, which is also when my mother got married, because a lot of women were getting married. Not that, I'm not sure in that movie how old she's supposed to be. I take it as like graduated from senior in high school or graduating from high school.
I think originally she was supposed to be 16, but when they like revamped her in the 50s, like she was 18.
But one thing that struck me is that most women back then did not drive, and they certainly didn't drive age and drive sports cars. And she's in airplanes, and she's hauling the so-called maybe boyfriend around by, Did you see the old movies?
I remember watching them probably when I was in college. The ones that I remember the most are the Hardy Boys Nancy Drew TV show from the 70s with Sean Cassidy, Parker Stevenson, Pamela Sue Martin. Like, so those are probably one of my favorite TV shows of all time.
Well, as an antique dealer, I love looking at these houses, particularly it's in the books too, but particularly in those movies, because they weren't antiques when those movies are made.
Mm-hmm.
These are stuff, and there's one of the movies, there's stuff that if I were writing a historical set in that time period, I wouldn't think of. She actually, I don't know, some bad guy has come in the house, and she puts out a sign saying she needs ice. She hangs it in the window, which is you wouldn't know about nowadays because her boyfriend's delivering ice, and she wants him to come in the house and find out she's being held hostage. And it's just like, oh my gosh, this is something as a writer I would have never thought of. And she just, wow, she would not. My mother probably would have gone, oh,
Oh,
yeah, odd girl.
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to just like fangirl over her more when I'm at Malice next week. It's going to be a really fun time. Laurel has put in the chat how much she loved Nancy Drew growing up and whether or not we've seen the Nancy Drew mystery or the video games. Laurel, you have no idea how much I have played those games. Absolutely love them. I know that they're actually making a new one, which I'm super excited about. Yes, I play video games, and I've played those games since I was 10 years old. Love them. And we actually have another question, real quick, Trish, from Wild Rose Bird. Iron Scotty dogs, will they play a part in future books? So back to your Scandal Mountain antique mysteries, real quick.
I don't think Iron Scotty dogs have played a part in any of my books so far. Did they? No, I don't think they have. Scotty dogs were popular, and I like Iron Scotty dogs, but I don't think they're in any book.
Not yet. So
not. Well, I
never say never.
I book that is with my editor. It's not so finished. It's complete. It is. I will know soon.
Excellent.
And this much, I do not use real people in my books, but I had a friend who is a big fan. And she wanted somehow to have a tribute. And in the third book, if it comes out, I have named a golden retriever after her. It is not a nice golden retriever. This is a golden retriever who is stinky, who likes to roll in stinky things and likes to steal food and has all the bad habits dogs could have. And her name is Sandra. So Sandra, and Edie has all kinds of nicknames for Sandra, the evil, stinky dog.
That's too funny. You're very brave because I learned long ago that I could not have anybody remotely named closely to anyone I knew, or it would just madness would ensue. So I'm glad that Sandra is up for the.
Well, that's like the dog too. It's
perfect. Well, Trish, this has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me, with our viewers this evening. As I'm getting ready to pull our giveaway winner, Laurel wanted to comment that she loves is that Secret of Shadow Ranch as the video game. That one's a very good one. I can't even, gosh, there's so many ones that I absolutely love. I think the Haunted Carousel was like the first one I did without any cheats, because I always had to look up how to do the puzzles. So I probably would not make Nancy Drew very proud. But our winner for this evening with our wonderful bundle is Miss Claudia Carpenter. Congratulations, Claudia. I think I may have your information already, but Claudia, go ahead and message me at giveaways@thebookishhour.com with your mailing address, and I will forward that on to Trish. To our viewers who joined us live, thank you so much for being here, sharing time with us on this Thursday evening. We're on Friday Eve, thank goodness. Trish, again, thank you for joining us. Congratulations again on a fabulous mystery.
Thank you.
A wealth of deception. Cannot recommend it enough. Viewers, make sure you check it out because you will love it.
Well, and Malice, a little extra fun for me since I'm not going to be there.
I will make sure I've been like saving all of my energy. We're talking about like introvertedness and how conferences can kind of be overwhelming. I have literally been saving all of my energy since last year's Malice so that I can just like come and be like as like excited and as much as I can display, because I do feel excited about it and I want to make sure that my excitement like shows at that level. So I will definitely make sure to have a good time.
Is we weren't going to talk too much about my early series, but my very first series, as Pat Esden,
Mhm.
actually took place in Maine near Blue Hill.
Oh, I know Blue Hill very well because my dad, he is a works with the medevac helicopter service, and he always had to go to Blue Hill for things, and that was I guess they have a lot of need for the air ambulance up in that area.
Well, there's reason because that's sort of like Dark Shadows area of
Mhm.
Maine.
It's
So,
Maine has a lot of fun nooks and crannies for you definitely to have mystery and suspense and intrigue. And Trish, you'll have to come back and talk to us more about your other series. And fingers crossed, when we hear back from the book 3 in the Scandal Mountain Mysteries, we would love to have you back to chat more antiques because we could go on. I could just like pepper you with questions forever.
thank you for inviting me. That was great.
Oh, well,
So,
thank you. And again, everybody, we wish you a wonderful evening. We will be back May 3rd, I believe, for our next episode. We are off next week as I will be out traveling. And until we see you again, stay bookish. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.